What's up, Overcome fam? My name is Genesis. I am the founder of Overcome. Welcome to the podcast. We have my very good friend here, Nina, and we're going to be talking through some hot button topics, and I'm so excited.
Hello, Overcome family.
Hey, Nina.
Thank you for having me here. It's such an honor, and I can't wait to see all that God does through you and through this podcast. So
Long time coming.
I know.
Here we go.
Get started.
Okay, so in your testimony, you had some gold nuggets that we're going to be diving into. I want to start with you growing up in church because there's such a stigma around that.
Right.
And not necessarily being a PK, but just growing up in church and what that looked like in your life.
So my great-grandparents were pastors, so I pretty much started going to church from birth. I gave my life to God at a really young age, and I was like on fire for God. I was going to those youth camps, and it was like a Pentecostal church, so
They're crazy.
Yeah, the crazy,
I love
the charismatic. I love it too, and so I definitely was in love with God. I was in love with Jesus. So that's where I started out, and then life happened.
As it does.
Yep.
So you said the key word that a lot of Christians say is lukewarm.
Yes.
And we know that there's scripture about it, but what does that mean for you?
So I started becoming lukewarm, I would say, when I was about 13 years old. I had, like my first boyfriend, and one thing led after the other, and I lost my virginity at a really young age. So that opened the door to pornography for me. And that's where, like, I would say I became lukewarm because I was starting to run to men, run to porn to fill the void that I was missing that I had with Jesus.
Yeah.
So
That's tough.
Yes.
So there's so much to dissect just in that. Okay,
Yeah.
so what was your introduction to porn? Did you find it? Did you discover it? Did someone show you?
So I think I just stumbled on it, and
Accidentally?
one click led to the other. This is
Yeah.
like before phones, so the computer, and it, it just opened that door. And, when I didn't have I would with guys, but then also with porn at the same time. It was just constantly with me. So that kind of led me down like a path of depression. My parents were getting separated at the time, so I just felt really alone. And since I didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to, I started struggling with it. I would say like it was almost an addiction because that was the one thing I was going to, and I didn't know who to talk to. So I just kind of suffered in silence.
And that is a really hard place to be.
Yes.
So at what point did you go from, because you knew the Lord, like you were saying, you
Yeah.
had lukewarm, then you had a boyfriend, and then what? So now here's your addiction.
Right.
Here's what you're walking in, and we're going to call it what it is.
Yeah.
Because that is what it became.
Yeah.
And we don't honestly always say that. And we're
Right.
just like, hey, I'm just struggling with this.
Yeah.
But if it's something that you use on a regular basis for a long
Yes.
time, call it what it is.
Right.
Okay, so with your addiction to porn, where did that lead you to into you were prime time? You were what? How old were you when you started?
I was 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prime time.
Oh yeah.
Middle
Hormones
school,
raging.
everything. Now
Yeah.
the boys are always naturally like this, even
Yes.
minus having the porn addiction or whatever.
Right.
You're honestly, especially as a girl, you're going at it.
Yes.
So what did that look like for you in your teen years?
I mean, I had a lot of boyfriends, friends. I started sleeping around. And then I eventually met my now husband. I was 16, so my sophomore year of high school. And, we were sleeping together, and I got pregnant at 16. So, I mean, like I said, porn was still in there with me. And then also sleeping with him as well. So that opened up a whole other can of worms because I was in church still. I was on the worship team at my church at the time, struggling in silence and not, I just felt so alone. And yeah, so that, the pregnancy happened, and
Now you're 16 and pregnant.
now I'm 16 and pregnant. Yeah. I mean, it was scary. So I had to sit down at the church that I was at. And
Because you wanted to, or?
no, I was told to sit down.
Okay.
Yeah. So still at that time, no one knew about my porn like addiction that I had. So, you know, during that time, like I still, like was 1 foot in, 1 foot out with God. You know, we wanted to make it right. And my pastor at the time was encouraging us, like after I gave birth to my daughter, he's like, you guys should make it right by getting married. So we did. We got married. I was 17 and Danny was 18. So we did that whole thing. But I still didn't deal with the root of that issue. So that like brought issues into our marriage very early on. I was dealing with depression, and still at the time he didn't know about my porn issues because I was still dealing with that early on in our marriage. So during that time, like I got into a depression and we were fighting. It was very toxic. So eventually, like he left. So we were married for 2 years and we got separated. And during that time, I had like a reality check, and that's when, you know, I really just said, God, like I want my marriage to work. Like I want this to, I want to honor you in this. So whatever like you want me to do, like I'll do. So during that time, I just was praying and fasting, and I did feel the Lord like tell me like I felt the Lord pushing me to like fight for my marriage, but also like, let's work on you. So still during that time, like I still had like, I wasn't ready to give up porn though. Like I still wasn't all in, but God was still working through me during that time. And, you know, eventually like we did after 6 months come back together and things were strong. Like Danny's, like I was praying specifically for Danny, my husband as well, for his relationship with God too. And that kind of started being birthed like after we got back together. So God was moving during this time. But I still was dealing with depression and porn.
Yeah.
Even
While
after we got
working on
back
you
together. While
and
working on
being
me.
married.
Yes. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah. And then eventually I like hit rock bottom. Like I was like so deep into the pornography that it was making me suicidal. Like I just felt like I'm such a bad mom. I'm such a bad wife. Like they are better without me. And at that point, I mean, it was scary. My dad moved in with us shortly after, and he tried to talk to God about me, but at that point, I had wanted nothing to do with God. I just didn't want to hear it. So I still started opening up to him though, because he was a very strong like spiritual influence in my life.
Yeah.
And he would still point me to God. And, you know, I still like was communicating with God, and like I just felt like you need to talk to someone about this. Like, and that's when I reached out to you.
Yeah.
During that time, I'm like, hey, like, and it was really hard. It was really hard to take that step because I felt like I was so alone. I'm like, women don't deal with this. Like, I've never really heard of girls dealing with pornography.
The stigma.
There's such a stigma, such a taboo subject. I'm like, but I'm just gonna step out in faith and do this because I want to be better for me. I want to be better for my daughter, and I want to be better for my marriage.
So let's dissect this
Okay.
because you were talking about how you had depression. Like it started, it stemmed, and it just got escalated to the point of like suicidal thoughts even.
Yes.
And that is not talked about a lot.
Right.
I know it's a hot button for like teenagers, but not necessarily, well, realistically, you were a teenager at that
Right.
time, but
Yeah.
you were a young mom. You're now young and married, and you're struggling with pornography completely behind closed doors, like
Yeah.
in the darkness. Now it's going into depression and suicide, all the while you have like this root in God.
Right.
And there's such a like cage around that specifically of like, well, you know the Lord, you can't struggle with this. Like,
Right.
and now there's like shame and guilt that's even wrapped in that. So let's talk about your depression really fast.
Okay.
Of what that looked like, even with having a daughter. So did that stem before you had her, or did it like get heightened through the situation, or like, you know, they talk about baby blues or
Right. So I think it definitely got heightened through that situation because, you know, being pregnant at 16, like, I feel like I lost a lot of friends. Like, I felt alone. Like, I had to grow up really, really fast and trying to navigate how to become a wife and a mom and all these things. And it was a lot. So I think it started stemming through that. And then like the addiction with the porn, that just heightened it. It made
Yeah.
it so much worse because I just felt so much shame. The shame was what was opening that, like leading me down like the darker path of feeling like I had no way out. So it really like affected how I was as a mom, like just patience and all that. Like I just felt disconnected too, you know, from her for a little bit too, because I just like in my mind I'm like they would be better without me.
Yeah.
You know.
And that's such a lie.
Right.
That we
It's
know
a lie
now,
from the
but
pit of
in
hell.
it, you don't know it.
Right.
And there's so
exactly.
many times that anyone could say, like, I've had that thought.
Yeah.
And there's situations that you're like, that you could walk yourself and talk yourself in and out of that.
Yeah.
So when you got to the point of reaching out to me, which I'm super grateful that you did,
Yes.
and we were basically neighbors at the time,
Yeah.
literally a couple streets down from each other. I had just moved, and you helped me clean my house.
Yeah.
That was a whole nother topic. But
Yeah.
I was brand new to church
Yeah.
and life and faith and everything God related. I definitely didn't grow up in that, but that's a subject for another
Yeah.
time. But you mentioned reaching out to somebody, and that is something that's also
Yes.
not talked about enough, or we make the mistake and we reach out to the wrong person
Right.
and it backfires, or we reach out to somebody and it's like really great, but the courage that it took for you to reach out to somebody and
Yes.
say, hey, I'm struggling with porn in my marriage,
Right.
to go into that.
Yeah. So, you know, it's so important. Like you were saying, like sometimes you do reach out to the wrong person, or the more you reach out to people, like it becomes less, I don't like to say awkward, but you have to reach out to people and find community and to be vulnerable with like what you're going through. But I highly like recommend like reaching out to someone. Like I looked at you, like I knew we had like our, you know, we spent a lot of time together. Someone you trust, and I trusted you, and I knew that you had a pure heart, like you really loved the Lord. So
Yeah.
I'm like, and I knew I wasn't gonna receive judgment from you, and I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what? She's the person to go to, and that just kind of led me, I guess, like jumping ahead really quick to, you know, continue reaching out to women of God that I know would speak life over these situations. So
There was a secondary part that we haven't talked about, though.
Yeah.
When you reached out to me, from my perspective, because I don't think we ever talked
know.
about this, I was genuinely like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Like, naturally, I'm like, yes, I point her to Jesus, but like, she's reaching out to me. And that actually gave me courage, because I went through a really hard season right after that. And I was like, if Nina can open up about this, then I'm going to open up to somebody too.
Right.
And it gave me the courage after that. But in that situation, we kind of talked about like, hey, when you feel this way, reach out to me, like
Right.
call me or text me or FaceTime me or something, and I will stop what I'm doing and I will pray for you.
Right.
And I did. And
Yes.
you did reach out to me every time. And
Yes.
it was more so like when you were alone, right?
Yeah.
So
for sure.
going into that, like finding your triggers,
Yes.
finding what makes you like feel the way that you do to make you do what you do, kind of thing.
Right.
And then also the accountability aspect of it.
Yes, it's huge.
That is secondary to like reaching out to somebody. So
Right.
like let's go to that.
Yeah.
So like I said, I think you would text me and be like, hey, I'm feeling something or
Right.
feeling like this way. And then I would start praying for you.
Yes.
But where were you at mentally with your own of like, now what? Like somebody is reaching out to me and they know how I'm feeling right now. So if I fail, like define your brain in that process.
So, like, I wanted to like tap in. You know, you were mentioning triggers. So, like my triggers, like being a mom, it switched. So I was running to those things, like with just the stress of motherhood and school and work at the time. So, hold on, I don't know if we can. I'm trying to see how I can answer the question you were asking.
Go ahead. Anyway.
So with like just those stressors, that's like what I would be like, okay, like I need to reach out, like even if, and like something that was huge that you were doing for me was giving me Bible verses. I mean, you know, the one that it always stuck with me is like, you know, if you submit to God and resist the devil, like he will flee.
Yeah.
So just filling my mind with those positive things, and also like you reminding me like God is like, I think you were just feeding me too, like, you're not too far gone, like, because that's how I feel. Like, I feel like I've done it again. I messed up again. Because I reached out to you multiple times, but it's because it didn't go away all of a sudden just because I reached out that first
Yeah.
time. Like,
Nor did you stop.
nor
either.
did I
It didn't
stop.
always
Yeah, it didn't
work.
just
Yeah.
automatically was like, okay, you reached out to someone, you're good to go. So, but it did give me strength to resist, though. I'm like, okay. So I started to do that, and then eventually, like, it was just easier for me not to run to that. I started running to God more
Yeah.
than that.
Here we go. The too far gone.
Right.
I feel like literally everyone at some point feels this way.
Yeah.
And I can say it confidently because I've been there
Yeah.
way too many times and I want to answer. But saying that you are too far gone, I feel like that is like the natural lie of the enemy. Like, you cannot turn back from this. This is where you're at. This is who you are. This is where you're walking. Now we're going to jump into that because I want you to talk to the person that is currently just going through it and is struggling, and a woman in their marriage using porn or bringing porn in, because as Christians, we are like, that's your unity between you and your husband. That is biblical. That's whatever. So there's natural shame that just comes with that.
Yeah.
And so now you're bringing in something else into your marriage. And then you feel this way, but it's all behind closed doors and you're hiding it. And that's naturally where the enemy just flourishes, is in the darkness, because that is who he is, like the king of darkness. So too far gone.
Right.
What are you going to tell somebody who is currently feeling that way?
First, I want to encourage you to, because especially in a marriage, like, it's super important to be transparent with each other. So that was one thing that, like, I ended up opening up to my husband about my porn issue shortly after reaching out to you, because I felt like that's something that, like, we should walk through together. And just being, like, transparent and vulnerable with that, and allowing him to just speak life over me as well in that situation. But the main thing is, being vulnerable with my husband, but then also making sure that I was running to God. I had to find my first love again, like, with God through that. And I had to, like, be real with myself and say, hey, like, what's the root of this? Like, I'm running to pornography. I'm running to these things because I'm trying to fill the void that only Jesus can fill. And just being completely transparent with myself in that. So you're not too far gone, but also remember, like Jesus is going to welcome you again with open arms. He's never going to shun you away or, tell you that, like, I can't use you, I can't restore you. Like, your calling or whatever is gone. Like, I have a purpose for you and a plan. Just trust me and, like, submit. And it's not, don't overcomplicate it, especially being moms. Like, I know we're going to be like, I just don't have the time, but God will meet you where you are. Just like, how we have to wake up every day and, like, care for our kids or our home or go to work. Like, we have to put God as a priority in our life. Just meet with him every day. Whether that's 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever that looks like for you, I promise you that God will show up and he will satisfy that void. And you're just going to keep falling in love with him and become obsessed with just spending time with him, because there's nothing else better than God. So I just want to encourage you, if you do fall, get back up and just continue chasing after God's heart.
Yes.
And he would stop in his tracks, because you're his little girl and he loves you. And he just wants to show you that. Be like, hey, like, I don't remember what you did. Like, that's gone. So let's just, like, keep moving forward. Like, we got this. I'll pick you up. And,
Have you seen that meme, or it's like a picture? I swear I love it so much, but it's like the little girl that has, like, the little bear, and she's holding it, and then it's like the picture of Jesus and what people think that he looks like, with, like, this massive bear behind his back. I feel like while you're talking, that's exactly what I see. And I feel like I've even sent that to you so many times, but I hold so strong to it of, like, when you're in something, you just feel like that is it. Like, you're consumed by it. This is it. There's nothing else that matters. Nothing else is around you. You don't see the end, especially, like, truly being in your trenches. But it's like, God, I want this. And he's like, but just I have so much better for you. And now you being on the other side of this, and how far along are you clean?
It's been a year.
Let's
Right?
go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a year clean.
Yeah.
And you're like, God, I see the big bear now. Like,
Yeah.
thank you for
Yes.
giving me this big bear. Restoring my marriage, restoring Danny's relationship with God.
Yeah.
You have Nailani and you have Evie, who's the
Yes.
cutest little
Yes.
nugget.
Yes.
And they're just radically like on fire as a whole.
Yeah.
And you are set on fire, and now you get to talk to these women and even men who are going to listen and like
Yeah, for
truly understand that like my marriage can be restored. I'm not too far gone. This is great. God is still good. And like I can always come back to God. Like he always has his hand out for me. And you mentioned in like a paraphrase of like Jeremiah 29:11, like God has a plan for you.
Yes.
And it's going to prosper you. It's going to help you. It's going to move you forward for a future. It's not for right now. Like it's in your future.
Yeah.
And that is just gold.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I really hope that this is going to help somebody, and I know it's going to,
Yes.
just speaking into that. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Yes, you're so welcome, guys. And remember, too, God will take what the enemy meant for evil and use it for good. And he will use your story to help someone else.
Yes.
So
That's exactly
yes.
what Overcome is.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.